Sounds like we're ready. All right, can everybody hear me so I don't have to lean over? Excellent. Let's get started. We have some busy schedules tonight, so we're working on a tight time frame. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for coming to the Hingham Republican Town Committee's annual Candidates Forum. My name is Laura Marwill, and I will be leading the forum tonight. The purpose of the event is to allow candidates to introduce themselves and their plans if they're elected, and for the voters to ask the candidates about issues that are of interest or concern to them. While this event is organized by the Hingham Republican Town Committee, it is a nonpartisan event, and we welcome the participation of all Hingham's candidates and citizens. Please allow me just a minute to speak about the format. Candidates will be invited to the front table by office, starting with the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Assessors. They will be called to the lectern in alphabetical order to make a 2-minute opening statement. After all candidates for an office have made their statement, I will ask the audience for questions. Unless the question is addressed to a particular candidate, I will ask for responses in reverse alphabetical order. Candidates will have 1 minute to respond. Let's see. Nathan is timing, right? Nathan here in the front row will be keeping time, and he will flash a signal as the timing winds down. He may give you a furrowed brow if you're going over time, so please respect the time constraints. For members of the audience asking questions, please come to the microphone so the audience at home and here in the room can hear you. Let's see. Just a reminder, this is not a debate format. We ask all participants and audience members to refrain from interrupting a speaker and that civility be maintained throughout the event. So with that, let's get started. I ask you to hold your questions until candidates have made their opening statements, and then I'll open it up to the floor for questions. And I'd like to invite to the lectern our first candidate running for Board of Selectmen, Mary Power.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you to the Hingham Republican Town Committee for hosting tonight's event, and to my fellow candidates for elected office for being here tonight. I'm Mary Power, and for the past 3 years, I've had the honor of being a member of your Board of Selectmen. I am running for re-election. You know, when I first approached this job, I had a lot of things that I wanted to accomplish. And I quickly realized that being a selectman really doesn't have a lot to do with what I want to do. It's more about what the citizens of Hingham want to do and responding to events that impact the town. Over the past 3 years, my agenda has been your agenda, making sure that services are delivered efficiently and effectively, implementing warrant articles, responding to citizen concerns, and mobilizing town resources when the unexpected happens, and that happens a lot. I'm proud of the accomplishments over the past 3 years. We've delivered 3 balanced budgets without an override. We've negotiated labor contracts that we can afford. We've achieved our 40B affordable housing minimum requirement. We've negotiated a long-term lease with Hingham Maritime, established task forces for the Route 3A and the compressor station, and have preserved over 50 acres of open space. We've also seen an increase in the number of volunteers who have stepped forward for the town. I think the appointing authority of the Board of Selectmen is one of our most important roles, and also tends to be one of the more overlooked ones. If re-elected, I pledge to continue to be guided by 3 principles that I spoke about when I first ran for office and that I hope have defined my service. And those principles are respectful leadership, responsible stewardship, and upholding Hingham's tradition of civil discourse. I respectfully ask for your vote on April 28th, and I thank you for your consideration. Thank you. Sure.
Thank you, Mary. The other candidate for Board of Selectmen, Russell Reeves, will not be with us tonight, so I'd like to open up it up to the audience for questions, please. Johanna, would you like to come to the microphone?
I had a question about the water company. Since the town now appears to have lost the legal battle to get the price they wanted, what is your position on what should happen next?
If you tune in tonight, in about 15 minutes, the Board of Selectmen will be talking about the water company. And last week, the litigation has concluded. We now have a firm purchase price for the water company and a formula for determining that price. And so tonight at the Board of Selectmen meeting, myself and my colleagues have not had a chance to talk about it. Our intention tonight is to begin a series of meetings to share information that up until now we could not release to the public because we were involved in litigation. Now, that's a lot of information, and it's a lot to digest. I can tell you it's been pretty complex over the last 5 years. So we intend to do it in a series of meetings to have dialogue with the town. I think this is too important a decision to leave to 3 members of any Board of Selectmen, and I look forward to engaging the public in a conversation about what this could mean for the town.
Are there any other questions from the audience?
Can
Oh, yes,
just
if
a
you have
follow-
another.
Do you have a, oh, sorry. As a follow-up, do you personally have a position on what you think should happen?
I don't, because I don't know enough. Right now, I think we have a sense of what the price will be, and certainly the financial picture is a lot clearer. But there are some other important considerations. How would the water company be organized? How would it be operated? There's also the question of the infrastructure that would be inherited. In my opinion, it doesn't matter who owns the water company. We, the ratepayers, are going to pay for the capital improvements. But I do think that there's some work that would need to be done. I think as a selectman, it's really important to keep an open mind. And while you may be advancing something for town meetings consideration, I think it's really important to keep an open mind and not make up your mind prematurely. So I certainly haven't made up my mind at this point.
Thank you. Is there any other question from the audience? I have one, if nobody else wants to jump in front. Ooh, I think that must be better. Mary, how do you feel about the meals tax? Do you feel that should continue to be used, restricted to the use for capital projects, or do you feel there should be a change in that?
Yeah, I do think that the meals tax revenue should continue to be used for large capital projects, mostly because that's how it was sold to town meeting. And I'm a big believer that part of my job is to carry out town meeting wishes. I would be uneasy about redirecting meals tax dollars without talking to town meeting about it first. The meals tax has been a real boon for the town. Last year, I think we collected $800,000. And that's being used to defray the cost of the middle school. We have between $50 and $80 million of capital projects under consideration, all very worthy. We don't have the ability to pay for all of them in the next 5 years. So to the extent that we are I would see continuing to use those meals tax dollars for those projects, which, by the way, is in keeping with what town meeting directed in the first place.
Thank you. No other questions? This is your chance. Libby, please come to the microphone. Thank you.
Hello, how are you? Quick question on development. I'm curious of your position as to whether you think the town has, if there are additional development opportunities in the town, or if we've kind of reached a saturation point, and if you think there are other opportunities, where particularly in town would those opportunities lie?
You know, with respect to development, I think it's all about balance, because while on one hand, new development means the opportunity to grow the tax base and the revenue base, which allows us to afford services, we also have to understand that development impacts quality of life. One thing that I'm very pleased about is the work of the South Hingham Study Group, which culminated this past year with the issuance of a report, which is a blueprint. As we look at the geography around Hingham, I think that South Hingham area around the South Shore Park, used to be called the Industrial Park, is a place that has the potential for some development, and the South Hingham Study Group has done a lot of work to understand the implications of that. And to me, it's really all about striking that right balance. I would point out that where I see the greatest development potential in Hingham is on land that right now is privately owned, and that's the Bristol property out on Derby Street. And we have, I saw the stop and got the furrowed brow.
I think we have time for you to finish your answer.
I think that we have to understand that as it relates to development, that private property owners have rights to develop the property that they own. I think one very beneficial thing is that now that the board has achieved a safe harbor status with respect to 40B, I think that is potentially going to change the complexion of some of that development, and that will be a good thing for Hingham.
Thank you, Mary. Jerry?
Going back to the previous comment about capital expenditures, what's your position on the future of the swimming facility at South Shore Country Club?
Yeah, so some of you may know that a feasibility study funding is being proposed this year at town meeting for community preservation. The Board of Selectmen and I, as a member of that board, have been pretty consistent with the Country Club Committee, which is to say that the swimming pool project has to be self-sustaining within the country club. And that means that the money to be raised to build the facility, the money to operate the facility, that has to be sustained within country club revenue. And the reason I think that's important is because I think that we have a lot of infrastructure needs in Hingham, such as fire stations, foster school, a senior center. And as much as I think it's a wonderful project, I sort of would classify it as a want as opposed to a need. And I think we need to make sure that we have the ability to pay for the needs before we look at some of the wants. I'm looking forward to the conversation with the Country Club Committee about their financial plan.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the audience for Mary? Yes, sure. Go ahead, come to the mic. You're getting your exercise.
One question, I know that people asked about the water company, and then you also talked about some of the capital projects that the town has that we're looking forward to, and you mentioned obviously the limited capacity to pay for those projects. So, I mean, do you even see an economic answer to try to fund the water company on the one hand, which is probably at whatever $110 million price, say, comparing that to all the town's needs? I mean, how can both be accomplished?
Sure.
Within our means?
So the concept with the water company is that it would make economic sense if, again, it would be ratepayer funded. And so the very simple concept is, under town ownership, if you can eliminate costs, that would allow room or capacity to pay the debt service for acquiring the water company. And the analysis that we've seen so far says that is possible. But again, a principle is that it would have to be ratepayer funded. Not all Hingham residents use the water company. And in fact, the water company also services Hull. So that's one consideration. With respect to the capital projects, one of our biggest priorities over the next several months is to look and say, how much capacity do we have within our budget for paying for these projects, and what other sources of revenue might we have? That's a conversation that the Board of Selectmen has started in our forecast and budget conversations, and we're hoping to continue that conversation into the summer because we know there are going to be some projects coming forward for consideration pretty soon.
I'd like to thank Mary for coming. We're going to end
you very
questions
much.
here. She's going to scoot out to her meeting. So thanks very much, Mary, for coming.
Thank you very
tonight.
much, everybody.
I'd like to invite Missy Roberts up to the front to join Al Chambers. Chrissy, did I say? Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, that's Missy, you're right. You're very close. That is, thank you.
Hi.
So Al Chambers is running unopposed for his term, and Chrissy is running with an opponent for a 5-year term, right? Or is it the other way? The 1-year term.
1 year
Okay.
left on a
Gotcha.
term.
All right. So let's have Al Chambers come up first for his statement.
Good evening. Thank you for coming out on this April shower, spring rain. Winter's over though, it's going to change quickly. My name is Carlton Allen Chambers. I live at 86 Central Street, which is the Lincoln School, and where I went to school in 7th and 8th grades. I am running unopposed, as you know, for the 3-year term. Please vote for me. Get out and vote. At least I should have the ability to tell my children at some point that I won in a landslide. The assessor's office is a very interesting office, sort of quiet. It is the lubricant for the cash flow that runs this town. And it's a substantial cash flow. As you know, we're talking 108 to 110 million. There are 8,000 properties here in Hingham that are assessed and recalibrated every 3 years. All sorts of properties, parkland, meadows, houses, 2 houses, 2 on a lot, a single lot. There are probably over 200 categories that make up the divisions for the taxation base. Totaled up, this department is extremely well run. We have a gentleman named Rick Nolan who is a designated an ASI, I believe it is, and I don't know what that means. But it means he knows his stuff. I have to go, as well as Chris, to a class after we get in there on how to do this. It's a requirement of the state. I've been in real estate for a number of years. I was in securities for a long time prior to that. I look forward to doing the job, and I ask for your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Al. Chrissy, please come to the lectern.
I'll be Chrissy Roberts on the ballot. Just once I didn't go by Christine anymore when I was little, I just couldn't go back. So I am Chrissy Roberts, running for the 1-year term on the Board of Assessors. A little bit about me. I've lived in Hingham for almost 20 years, married with a daughter going into the high school next year and a son going into the middle school. I have a degree from UConn in accounting, and I used that for a few years as an internal auditor. Decided everybody hates you when you're an internal auditor, so I moved into HR after that. And then I've been a stay-at-home mom for the past 14 years since my daughter was born. I've been a very active volunteer in Hingham, mostly in the schools. I was PTO president at East School, assistant treasurer, and head of our biggest fundraiser, the annual appeal. I've also been very active at St. John's, where I was Sunday school director, numerous positions on the Holiday Boutique Committee, and I was recently named outreach chair. I've also volunteered on the house tour for years and was appointed to the Council on Aging last fall. So I decided to run for the board because I have more time to give. And with the Council on Aging, I realized there's a whole other population besides the elementary school that I would love to learn about and get more involved in. I'm comfortable taking on the role because I have lived in Hingham a long time. I've owned 3 houses here. I have a good feel for the market. Plus, as Al alluded to, we have no shortage of folks helping us out. There's 4 full-time staff members. We're going to take the test he mentioned as well. Greg Hall, who would be the other board member, has been doing this for 33 years, so a lot of knowledge to lean on as we get up to speed. I do have the financial background, so I'm comfortable with numbers and spreadsheets and analyzing data. I have experience working on teams and weighing and balancing information and adding value on different opinions. I have the drive and commitment to do the job, which is probably the most important. I'm enthusiastic and excited and promise to give it 100% if elected. Thank you.
Thank you both for your statements. Are there any questions for the audience, from the audience? This is a tough one. I actually do have a question because I understand that we hire a firm that actually does the evaluation. Can you explain to me your role and their role and why we need an elected board if we hire somebody to do the assessments?
Is that for
I will ask you first since you spoke second. Yes.
That's a good question. I don't know why we need a board. I'm assuming it's in some kind of town, Mary probably could have answered this, some kind of town bylaws or something, because we do have the full-time staff. The system's called Vision, and it does collect the data on all the houses and makes adjustments. The problem is it's not always right. And that's why it's helpful to understand looking at data and outliers and different factors. So if somebody thinks their taxes are wrong, they can file for an abatement each January. to say, you have me listed as a 4-bedroom, but I'm only a 2-bedroom, so clearly they are paying too much in taxes, and we would adjust that. So it's and Al can chime in as well, it's my understanding that that's where we really add the most value, is looking at all that data and figuring out what's right, what's wrong, what needs adjusting, what hasn't, isn't up to par.
Thank you. Al, do you have something to add?
Yes, some of these properties are really complicated. There's 500 industrial or commercial properties. Our largest taxpayer in town is Linden Ponds. You don't throw a number at that easily, so we use professional help, and probably the most important part from the board itself is the use of good judgment. Ideally, you try to come in somewhere around 90% of what everybody thinks is the actual value. You have 30 days at the end of the year to protest if you think you're being assessed too high. And usually the question asked by the assessors at that point is, would you sell me your home for the figure I've assessed you at? And the answer is usually no. But it's a moving target. It will probably continue to move dynamically in Hingham, both up and down, in the coming years.
Thank you. Did anybody else think of a question? Yes, Jim, please go to the microphone.
I'm just curious, you often hear about a point system used by the assessors whereby houses in different neighborhoods are valued higher or lower. So the same house, identical building, would vary by 10 or 15%, whatever it might be. Is that still in effect? And do you think it's a fair system, or do you think it's effective?
Is that for him? I'm sorry.
We'll
Is
start
that
with
one?
Al
Yours,
for
okay?
that one.
Either.
That's why the most important part, Jim, is judgment. There is some variety. I was at a meeting last week, and a fellow got up and said, I'm living by a hotel on Crow Point, and it's driving my value up. I said, where is the hotel on Crow Point? There are codes into which each property is placed accurately, and then there are certain similar factors that multiply against it. They do a good job, and it also includes private property, cars, boats, things like that. And so it's not just a matter of the neighborhood, Jim. You use your own judgment when you get down to the final effort.
I can't speak to the point system specifically, but I think it is fair and makes sense. If you have the same exact house, but one has a sweeping view of World's End and one doesn't, that's going to sell for more. Sure. And so it is all market-based, and like Al alluded to, that's what we're trying to do, is just be fair and figure out the market value. I think it's 95%. Rick Nolan had said they try to, or Greg, somebody was, one of them, where they were very excited about being able to tout that they get within that 95% value. So I think it does make sense, somebody, buying a home like that with a view like that, or a flat lot versus somebody that doesn't have a usable lot. I think, follows the market.
Any other questions for the Board of Assessors? Then join me, please, in thanking our candidates.
Thank you.
And I'd like to invite the candidates for school committee to come to the front, please. Aileen Calnan, Libby Lewicki, and Kerry Nee. And I don't know if they want a bottle of water, but maybe we'll deliver them a bottle of water. Starting in alphabetical order, please, I'd like to invite Aileen Calnan to come to the lectern to make a 2-minute statement.
Hello, I'm Aileen Calnan, and as a little bit of background, I am a 30-year resident of the town of Hingham with my husband David. We have 2 daughters, both of whom graduated from the Hingham Public Schools, one who is now herself a public high school teacher in the city of Boston. She's a chemistry teacher for the Boston Public Schools. I'm a graduate of Wellesley College and of Boston College Law School. I've been practicing law part-time here in Hingham for over 25 years. In addition to living in Hingham for 30 years, I'm actually a lifelong resident of the South Shore. I am just finishing my first 3-year term on the school committee. During my tenure on the school committee, I've served as secretary. This year, I'm currently the vice chair of the school committee. I've also been on the policy subcommittee, and this year I was the chairperson of the salary and negotiations subcommittee, which means I played an integral role in the negotiations with all our collective bargaining units that started last spring and ran till just recently. I think that I have brought a voice of reason and a collaborative spirit to the school committee. I am seeking re-election because I look to bring the experience and knowledge that I've gained over these past 3 years particularly to assist with the upcoming projects and issues that are confronting the school committee. Things like the Foster School Building Project and the superintendent search that we're about to embark on. In addition to serving on the school committee, I also am on the Hingham Affordable Housing Trust and the Lincoln School Board of Managers. I want to continue to work on maintaining and modernizing our facilities as necessary. I also want to continue to provide our students with the tools to succeed, such as our new health and well-being programs and curriculum that we're implementing. I also want to continue to ensure that our students receive a well-rounded and challenging education, particularly in light of the enrollment issues that are facing the middle school and the high school. There are 2 spots open on the school committee, so I would ask for one of your votes on April 28th. Thank you.
Thank you, Aileen. I'd like to invite Libby Lewicki, please.
I'm going to be Elizabeth Emerson Lewicki on the ballot. I'm sorry. Just look for Libby Lewicki. And I'm not going to use the podium because you won't see me. My name is Libby Lewicki, and I'm running for school committee because I want to be part of the conversation with other critical thinkers who have nothing but the public school system, the well-being of the public school system, and the children at heart. I want to ask the hard questions, and I want to do the homework that's necessary to make informed, trustworthy, and respectful decisions. I am married to a Hinghamite. He's here, John Lewicki. We have 2 boys. Kyle graduated last year, and Emmett is a sophomore at the high school right now. We've been extremely happy with their education so far, and I want to give back. With my education and my practical experience, I will bring a unique perspective to the table. Not so uniquely, I am a product of public schools. I went to public schools in Maplewood, New Jersey. It's a town similar to Hingham. I attended Hamilton College and graduated cum laude with a degree in sociology, and I have an MBA in nonprofit management from Brandeis University. Most of my professional jobs have been in the nonprofit sector. So here in Hingham, I volunteered as PTO president at South School and then again at the high school. Aileen was my predecessor there at the high school. But most uniquely of all, I am a substitute teacher. And I've been subbing for 6 years in Hingham. I've been in all 6 schools, all grades, kindergarten through 12th grade, all subjects. I know what it's like on a daily basis to educate, evaluate, engage, and protect our students, our children, our most valuable assets, our leaders of tomorrow. There are many important questions that are going to come before the committee in the next 3 years. Who do we hire for a new superintendent? What do we do about foster school? Can we afford full-day kindergarten? What about the health and wellness center at the high school? And human resources director, just to name a few. So I'm excited. I want to work on a tight and balanced budget and graduate students who have thrived and are civic-minded and can tackle the world. So I stand here before you today and ask for your vote for school committee.
Thank you, Libby. And Carrie, please come up.
Hello. Thank you to the Hingham Town Republican Committee for organizing this event. My name is Carrie Nee, and I'm very excited to be running for school committee this spring. My husband Glenn and I have 2 boys, 11 and 14, and they both have special needs, so we haven't taken the traditional route through the Hingham Public Schools. During our journey through the schools, I've been humbled and awed by the talented and caring professionals who work with our boys, and their dedication inspired me to get involved, to volunteer, and to give back to support all of the people who do so much for all of our children. I've been fortunate enough to serve as the South PTO president. I'm there now, and Libby was there before. I am the current vice president and founding board member of South Shore SNAP. I am the South liaison to Hingham CPAC, and I was selected to join the Special Education Continuous Improvement Task Force. Also, I've been very active with the middle school PTO, and I was on the mini grants committee, and I was a professional musician before I went to law school, so I play with the high school chorus, and I tune violins and violas before the All-Town Strings concert. Being involved has given me a unique perspective. I've seen the great things that Hingham Public Schools does for our kids. I've seen the challenges that face our schools and our community, and some areas where we can improve. So I think that my involvement in the community and my training as an attorney would be a good asset for a school committee. If I'm elected, my priorities would be: 1, supporting the development of more STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math education to make sure that our students have the ability to navigate a rapidly changing technological landscape. 2, advocating for further social and emotional education to ensure that our students have the support they need in school, but also have the skills to navigate the world when they leave Hingham Public Schools. Finally, if elected, I pledge to make sure that our education dollars are spent as efficiently as possible so that all of our students get the best possible education with our available resources. Please reach out if you have any questions, issues, or concerns. I'd love to hear from you. And thank you again, and I ask for your vote on April 28th. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the audience? I know there always is for the school committee. Don't be shy. Am I going to have to throw? All right, I have one for you. In particular, Carrie and Libby, you both talked about how you're already involved in other causes, in particular working as a substitute in the school system and then working with some of your special needs issues. Are you going to be able to balance the responsibilities of the school committee with these other? Will you continue to do that, or will you focus on the school committee responsibilities? And I will start with Libby on that one.
So unfortunately, I would have to give up subbing if I were elected to the school committee, and that breaks my heart. It's taken me 6 years to get to the point where I could say that, because I am in love with the schools, and I've made connections with enough people there, the students and the teachers and the administrators all, that I feel like I have made a difference, and that I walk down the hallway and I hear, "Hi, Mrs. Lewicki," down, and it's, I'm gonna have to give that up. And so I'm sorry about that, but I am at the same time ready to move on and to focus on the school committee and seeing things from another perspective. And yes, I will have time to focus on the school committee.
Thank you. And Carrie?
So fortunately, I do not have to make that sacrifice. I will continue to serve on the SNAP board, and I will be able to do it successfully. We actually have a member of the board, Dr. Ed Schreier, is also in the school committee and has been able to do it successfully. So I plan to continue the same. I think my experience as a parent of children with special needs kind of brings me a different perspective to the school committee, and it kind of brings some balance into it. The special education budget, it's a quarter of our budget, so it's really essential that we spend that correctly. So I think that I can bring both. And also for SNAP, one of our main goals has been working with the community and reaching out to the schools. And I think being able to have both roles at the same time will be good for the school committee and good for SNAP.
Thank you. Any other questions? Gordon?
Good evening. First, thanks for your willingness to step up, because whether I've got a couple of kids in the schools, but whether we have kids in the schools or not, we are so reliant on the school committee and for everything you do for the public schools in Hingham. It's a huge asset for all of us, right? It's one of the things that makes this town as special as it is, and everything that you have on your plate coming up is daunting. A lot of them, though. So Foster School, wellness center. Those are things, right? But replacing Dot Gallo or finding a successor to Dot Gallo, right? That's a legacy project, right? We've been so blessed to have her running it for as long as she has. And I just wanted to see if, and I know you can't get specific because you don't know, but as that search goes, if you're going to be involved in that search, what are some of the characteristics of folks, whether it's, do you want somebody young and aggressive that's going to be here a while, or you're looking for somebody that has the maturity, just to get a sense of how you might approach a search for the new superintendent.
Thank you, Gordon. Let's start with Aileen on that one.
So one of the things that I would definitely support, and it's funny because the question for the Hingham Journal this week is regarding the superintendent search. So some of what we're going to say, you had a sense. One of the things I definitely would support, and we've been doing this very successfully over the past year, we've started doing a lot more public forums and getting public input on different things. And I think that we would want to do forums for a variety of groups, parents, students, community members who don't even have children, and find out what the characteristics are that the community is looking for. Right now, most superintendents that get hired, actually the statistics are, don't make it much past 5 years. I want to find somebody who's going to be here more than 5 years. But I want to find somebody with the cultural fit that will do that, and with the characteristics that the town sees as being important in a superintendent. So I think that it's going to be a daunting task, but I think that we need a lot of community input on what everybody thinks is the right fit for Hingham.
Thank you. And I'll ask Carrie to answer next.
Okay, yes, I agree with that. We have a really good search process in place that we've used to replace some of the principals and other people in leadership position over the past few years. So I think that works really well. And again, the forums are a great idea. I hope we spend the next year and a half also celebrating Dr. Gallo, because she has done so much for our schools. But looking forward, I think the characteristics I would look for is we want somebody who's going to be a good communicator, both communicating out what the schools are doing, but also listening to the community beyond just the forums and getting hired. I think we need somebody who's going to be proactive, both about the facilities management and also about education. It's a critical time for education because it's changing. The skills that were so important are changing, and I think it's critical that we find someone who can help guide our students and families through the changing technological landscape. So I think that will be really crucial.
Libby?
So yes and yes. This is a fabulous opportunity for us as a community to come together and ask and think about the future and decide what is our culture, what do we want, what do we see in the future, it's kind of weird, but there is a really good system in place to make that happen. And so I will listen and consolidate and lay it all out, and we'll see where we go. And I'm sorry to see Dot Gallo go. It is a loss, but it's also a great opportunity.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Jerry?
If Foster School doesn't get MSBA reimbursement, what is Plan B?
I think Libby gets to start.
I get that one. I have no idea. I will look into it. That's a good question.
Power politics.
And I'm prepared to do the homework necessary to answer that question the next time it comes up.
All right.
I guess renovate it.
Yeah. Maybe
I'm
Aileen.
sorry.
Maybe you're a little up the learning curve on this one. What do you think?
At this particular time, we do not have a firm Plan B. We are hoping that we are accepted into the MSBA program. Clearly, something needs to be done about Foster School. There's no denying that fact. And the risk we run right now is that if something significant happened at Foster School as far as that heating system, we could have to displace the entire school population. That in and of itself would be such a nightmare. We don't ever want to go there. We're not at risk of that happening this winter or even next winter, but Foster School needs to be addressed. Certainly, we would have to have a very long conversation, and we'd have to have a lot of community input, because renovating it might not be the best answer, but if the state's not going to help us fund it, then clearly there would have to be a community discussion as to whether or not the town wants to pay out of its own pocket for the construction of a new school. And we would have to explore renovation options to be fiscally responsible and present that as well. But right now, there is no firm plan B, because to start talking about what to do if we're not accepted into the MSBA program would be such a huge conversation that they're really, to spend the time and effort on that wouldn't be appropriate until we know we have to go there.
Carrie, do you have anything to add?
I do. Yeah, I agree. This is a community discussion, and it would be up to town meeting. I think we have an excellent public school system, and it's really important that we have the facilities to support that. So I think we would have to work towards that and figure out and work with administration and the town to figure out whether to renovate or to bite the bullet and get the new school. I think this also kind of illustrates how important the long-term planning is, and I think we should talk about that as the town, and if elected on the school committee, to look at all of our buildings they're getting older, and it's just as when you have a house, you know that there are certain renovations and certain maintenance you're going to have to do. We'll have to do that with all of our school facilities as well.
Thank you. Another question? Okay, I have one then. And we'll start with Carrie. How do you feel about the funding of full-day kindergarten?
So that's another community discussion for sure, because it would be expensive. It would be adding another $1 million to the budget. So that's something that the town would have to decide. Personally, I am in favor of it. Most of the state has free full-day kindergarten at this point, and the advantage of that is that it would encourage more parents to send their kids to Hingham Public School kindergarten, so everyone would learn the same things and they could hit the ground running in first grade. It would also eliminate the half-day option, so teachers would have the flexibility to better plan their days. So I think those are the advantages of it. And also philosophically, public school should be public. However, it would add $1 million to the budget. So I think that's something that the town would have to discuss. And if we did decide to do it, I've seen from other initiatives that we've taken that when Hingham decides that something's a priority, then we find a way to do it in a way that's relatively painless.
Thank you. Libby?
So I'm in favor of it if we can figure out how to pay for it, and statistics do show that those children that benefit from a good education early on in life do better later on in life. And so we need to talk about how to make that happen.
Thank you. Aileen?
And I would repeat that public school it's supposed to be free, and in the perfect setting, yes, if we could find a way to fund it, I would want to fund it. Right now, however, I don't see that being something that I personally would be likely to push for only because of foster school. Whatever happens with foster school, I think it's likely that we would have to be looking for some sort of override to deal with foster school. And so, as much as I would like to also see full-day kindergarten funded, unless there was some way that we could do it without looking for an override for that too, that would concern me, because if we're going to have to ask for an override to build a school, I don't know if I'm quite ready to ask for an override for that as well. Maybe in the future I would, but not at this juncture. I'd need to get through the foster school project first before I could make that kind of a decision.
Thank you very much. That's all the time we have for questions. So I'd like to have everybody thank the school committee candidates. We're going to vote for 2 of the 3 at the elections on April 28th. Thank you very much for coming. And I would like to invite candidates for the planning board, Crystal Kelly and Judy Sneath, to come to the front, please, to come to the table. All right, thank you. And in alphabetical order, I'd like to invite Crystal Kelly to come to the lectern, please.
Hi, I'm Crystal Kelly, and I'm running for the open seat on the planning board. Before I tell you all a little bit about me, I wanted to thank the Republican Town Committee for hosting this event. I wanted to thank everyone who's attending and the other candidates here tonight. I love Hingham. This is the most amazing community. Every day I'm moved by the beauty of the town, from the harbor to the picture-perfect Main Street to the close-knit neighborhoods just beyond it. Hingham is the town that I have chosen to raise my family in, and I'm proud to be a part of such an incredible place. I live with my husband and 4 kids in Liberty Pole. Our 2 oldest sons attend South Elementary School. Our 2 youngest are in diapers. I'm an attorney by trade. After graduating Suffolk Law School, which I chose to attend because of its focus on public service, I worked at the Massachusetts Land Court. The Massachusetts Land Court is a court of specialized jurisdiction. It only hears cases related to certain real estate matters, which include appeals of zoning board decisions, planning board decisions, 40B cases, and all matters arising under the subdivision control law. After working at the land court, I opened up my own practice where I specialized in land use, environmental, and real estate law. I made my career representing abutters to various projects all over Boston and the surrounding suburbs. I'm also a member of the Volunteer Lawyers Project, and I represented various neighborhood groups for environmental justice issues, and where I had success receiving concessions from state and federal actors to improve quality of life in these neighborhoods. Fundamentally, I'm a problem solver. Through my legal work, I was presented with pieces of complex legal and factual puzzles to put together in such a way that resolved my clients' issues. If elected, what I will bring to the planning board is my relevant professional background and experience, as well as my keen interest in municipal planning. I will put a fresh set of eyes on Hingham's issues while continuing the tradition of excellence on the board. I may not have been here for 40 years, but I intend to be here for the next 40 years. So I please ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. Judy Sneath, please come to the lectern.
Thank you, Laura and Missy and everyone who's here, and Crystal. I like this format a lot. I am Judy Sneath, and I'll tell you quickly a little bit about my involvement in Hingham and why I'm running for planning board. I've lived in a historic home right downtown across from the Snug since 2003. Throughout the Greenbush construction, I was the director of the Downtown Business Association. In 2006, I was elected to the planning board, and in my 11 years on the board, I served on several committees, most recently as chair of the South Hingham Study Group. In this past year, I have chaired the Route 3A Task Force, working with Hingham, Hull, Cohasset, and state officials to plan for safety improvements along that corridor on the north side of town. I love the work of the planning board, balancing the individual rights of private property owners with the concerns of abutters and with the interests of all the town's residents, really. This, after all, is living in a community, balancing our individual needs with the greater good. We look out for each other and we invest our time in this town. The planning board leads in-depth conversations about how this town we share should grow. It can be difficult, and not everyone is entirely pleased every night, but the board does find greater balance, and the process always improves the process at hand. So why am I running for a seat? With 400 new families moving into 2 40B projects in our northwest corner, and still undefined development looming in the southwest, with our water supply nearly tapped out and growing frustrations with traffic, the planning board needs a member who knows our neighborhoods, is well versed in Hingham zoning, and can reach across town committees and town lines to find balanced solutions that serve the greater good, that preserve our unique character and also encourage investment in the future. I have faith in the work of Hingham's planning board and would like to continue to contribute to the town's future. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ladies. Are there any questions from the audience, please? Jerry?
I didn't really plan to ask this many questions, but these wonderful presentations just kind of excited me. The current Senate is considering a zoning reform bill, so-called Senate Bill 81. This town committee actually sponsored a forum on that some couple of months ago, and I wonder what is your position on that zoning reform bill, and if you are against it, what would you do about that?
And we'll start with Judy this time.
I have to say I'm cautious about the Senate's bill. There are parts of it that I think would be, in, as we say, looking for balance in the greater good of the entire state. And yet, as the school committee and others have talked about, we in Hingham really like to control what goes on in Hingham through our town meeting process. And it's a grassroots process that involves everyone. So there may be parts of that bill that I would support, but generally the Hingham zoning bylaw is what has to prevail in this town. What I would do about that is contact Patrick O'Connor and Joan Meschino and make sure that they understood what the sentiment of the planning board is and what the sentiment of the general town is.
Thank you. Crystal?
Hi. So, having litigated a lot of cases under Chapter 40A, which is the the Massachusetts zoning law, I can tell you from an attorney's standpoint and for someone that's worked at the court that the 40A could use a couple of tweaks here and there to make it flow a little better, to clarify some things, work things out, and to the extent that that bill, does those things, that's something that I would, cautiously support. However, that's something that I would need to carefully study and see how it impacts and affects Hingham's specific situation. Because I'm not coming to you today as a practicing attorney, I'm coming to you today as someone, who's seeking a seat on the planning board, and I'm actually not practicing law at the moment, which is why I have the time to work for the people of Hingham on the planning board. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Tina? Thank you.
I just want to know, what role does revenue play in your thinking regarding the planning board activities?
The planning board members don't make any money.
I know. But as far as everything that we have going on in town, are you paying attention to the revenue behind the planning board's decisions?
Let's start with Crystal.
I can honestly tell you that as someone who is not presently sitting on the planning board, that revenue, are you talking about tax revenue? Mm-hmm. Okay, just to clarify. Look, I think that, as some of the other people who've spoken in front of us, I believe Mary was talking about that there needs to be balance in the town, and I think that's something that relates to a master plan. They've talked about, the South Hingham study. Those are things that I believe that the South Hingham study looked into as sort of the balance between commercial and residential uses, and that's something that I believe in. If I'm elected to the planning board, I'm a big believer in having some sort of a plan that guides everybody's, everybody's strategy and into what to do where. And I think that's something that would be important to stick with. And to the extent that revenue factors into that, I believe that some of that's a legislative question that may be best left up to the town meeting. So how much commercial space do we want in this town?
So it's a great question. The South Hingham Study Group was formed because the Board of Selectmen wants to improve the ratio of commercial to residential tax revenue. And that area is underdeveloped and a likely place for new commercial development that would bring additional revenue to the town. Having said that, private property owners come in with projects, and the town can't really influence how much revenue is going to come from that project. So instead, we focus on impact, and we focus really hard on the impact on the people who are in Hingham already, on the neighbors, on the infrastructure, on the water, on all of the constraints, for example, in South Hingham. And revenue comes next, particularly if mitigation is warranted because of the impact, there would be serious discussions about revenue to the town or some kind of mitigation, really. So, thank you.
Another question from the audience? Yes, Lorraine?
With all the building going on, I'm driving down 3A and it's like we're becoming an apartment building town. So I'm wondering what your feelings are about how much of that development, instead of being beautiful homes and neighborhoods, it just feels like we're becoming a different town. Actually, when I was at one of the meetings I live on Lincoln Street, and the trucks go through my town, over my street now, and, big, huge trucks come through my small street of Lincoln. And the person that was in charge of the roads and stuff said, well, we're like Braintree. Think of us like Braintree now. And I'm just wondering, especially you've been on the planning board for a while, what's the thought, where are we going with this? Because I understand all these people have this land, they want to sell it, and instead of building homes, they're making all this money on these big developments. But how can our schools and taxpayers pay for this? Because they're being filled with lots of children that now we have to build bigger schools and all that. So.
Thank you, Lorraine. Judy, I think you're first.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, so the reason why we have 400 new families coming into North Hingham and in those apartment buildings that you're talking about right now is because of the state Chapter 40B that requires that the town hit 10% affordable with capital A units in town. Hingham has now been recognized as having a 10% affordable count, although we had argued differently for years. And so what that does for us is it gives us a chance now to plan for the development, the type of development that we want in this town. And I think what has to happen next, once all of this is built and the dust settles, is we have 20 years or so of free time where we can think about what kind of housing do we want in this town. And what I have heard is that people want to downsize and they want to stay in this town. People want their younger adult children to be able to move to town and raise their families here. And right now they're priced out of the market. So we really need a conversation about that middle income housing.
I just have one follow-up question. So I'm seeing all these signs around town about another complex somewhere in town. I don't know exactly.
Riverstone.
Riverstone. So now if that gets built, does that now impact our 40B, and now we're in the same boat again with trying to meet that need?
So that project, the application for that project came in before we met the 40B 10%. And so the application still must be reviewed by the town as if we had not met the 40B 10%. The Zoning Board of Appeals is currently hearing the process. The Board of Health is currently, has just weighed in a very dramatic and significant way on what the impact of that project would be on the aquifer and on, the health of the residents in the area. And we'll see how it goes.
How do we, as townspeople, get involved in this to be able to help that? Sorry, I should have.
That's okay. We're going to give Crystal a shot.
Yeah, can I just make a comment on that? Sure. I mean, I think one of the things that was brought up was this safe harbor. Hingham was very lucky in some respects to receive such a large safe harbor, such a long safe harbor. Many towns get very short safe harbors, only 2 or 3 years. So Judy's right. I mean,
why is that? Sorry.
I'm honestly not 100% sure. I'd have to look. Oh, she probably does know because she was on the board when it happened.
I do know.
Yeah, but before we get to that, but because you do have this time, you do have time to plan, and the development which you were asking about, the Riverstone there, that won't impact the current 40B requirements, those apartments, because of the safe harbors in place. And I think, does that answer what you were asking a little bit, or?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's just people that I've talked to have
Yeah.
been saying that now we're going to, once that gets built, now we're under, and we need to create more.
No. The safe harbor is, well, it takes care of that. So that doesn't, the safe harbor is there, and that's kind of what, you know, when we're talking about with planning, that, you know, and I agree with my opponent here, that this gives the opportunity to sort of create a plan and to look at what the needs are and to figure out where the developable parcels are, and to you should be able to figure out what a max build out is in the town, and sort of, you know, potentially, and sort of take things from there and see where the town should go, and give it up to the people and see what they want to do.
Thank you. I'll let Judy answer that question about why I didn't
Yeah.
realize there were different safe
yeah.
harbor times.
So, we are not we have met the official 10% count without the Riverstone project in the numbers. Once the Avalon and the Alliance projects are built, we will have met our 10%. So that gives us a safe harbor for as long as we stay within that 10%. Given that there's no significant, like there's no room in town right now for a, you know, new Liberty pole, our denominator should stay pretty much the same, so that our numerator keeps us in that 10%. If the Riverstone project were to be approved and those units were to be built, it would certainly, those units would go into our count, both on the numerator of affordability and in the denominator. But it wouldn't really change dramatically the amount of time that we now have, where we are in charge of our zoning, where no developer can come to Hingham and say, this is the density that I'm gonna put here, and you can't say anything about it. So it does give us, we have local control regardless of that project.
I think we have time for one more question for the planning board before we invite the housing authority up. If nobody has one, I do. Oh, Jerry, go.
What is your position on the upcoming zoning bylaw amendment for accessory dwelling units?
Where are we on
We are at
turns?
Crystal. I'm
Okay.
sorry. Thank you.
I think that it is a good compromise. I think that it meets the needs of the people who would like to have some sort of an in-law apartment in their house. It gives the town regulatory control over through the special permitting process to make sure that, you know, these apartments meet, you know, certain minimum standards, and, you know, to ensure things like, you know, parking and whatnot, which, you know, that before that the town did not have that element of control. And I think it was a good compromise. I think that it allows people to have this in their homes, but it doesn't allow it to get to be too far, and I don't think that it will impact the character of the town negatively. Thank you.
I agree. The planning board has been talking about accessory dwelling units for a good long time. I admire the work of Gordon and everybody else on the planning board this year to try to come to an article that would actually get to town meeting. We've had a number of starts that weren't successful in getting there. And what this article does is it contains this accessory dwelling unit use to families, to zoning dimensions. They cannot be built even into Hatfield, you know, non-conforming extensions, to 2 bedrooms, to a certain number of accessory dwelling units within the housing count in the town. So there's also a cap. So it's a very controlled expansion of the use, and one that people in town have been wanting for a very long time.
Please join me in thanking Crystal and Judy for joining us tonight. Thank you. And I'd like to invite Megan Burr and Jim Watson from the Housing Authority to come to the front. Is it Burr or Burr? It is Burr. Okay, thank you. Well, I'm glad I asked then. And Jim Watson? Oh, you're on the other side, I think. So I'd like to ask Megan to come to the lectern for an opening comment.
Hi, my name is Megan Buer, and I'm running for one of the 2 open seats on Housing Authority. This is finishing out the last 2 years of a 5-year term. I would be the 3rd person in this 5-year term, so it's obviously an exciting race, an exciting seat. I've lived in Hingham for a little over 25 years. I live with my husband and my 3 children on Main Street. As we all know, I think housing affordability is a huge issue in Hingham and across the entire state, which is why the Housing Authority is actually mandated by the state. I think it's the only town board that's mandated by the state. Every state or every municipality in Massachusetts has to have one. If elected, I have to go through state training. There's sort of very strict requirements behind it. Affordable housing is important for all municipalities because it allows older people on reduced income to remain in town. It allows the community's low-wage workers, and I'll get to that in a second, to be able to live in a community that they work in, and it allows people with special needs who can live independently to live with dignity in a supportive environment. And I'll note here that in Hingham, low income means under $100,000 for a family of 4, so it's all relative. I'm running because I want to support all of the above. I think that communities have a responsibility to take care of their most vulnerable people, and I think that there's a very thin line between middle class and even upper middle class and vulnerable in our society. A lot of people know this, but my husband actually grew up in affordable housing. He lived a nice middle class life. His father left, his mother got sick. She couldn't work anymore, and they ended up living in what we would call affordable housing, although they were in the United Kingdom. I want to thank you for inviting me, and I hope that I can count on your vote on April 28th. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. And Jim, would you like to come to the lectern, please?
Once again, thank you to the Republican Town Committee. I'm a member of the Democratic Town Committee, so this is sort of an adventure. But my grandfather was elected Republican state representative in Connecticut. So we all have shady backgrounds. No, not really. I'm running unopposed for re-election to the Housing Authority. I've been on it since '97. This is my 5th term. And I can't say we've done as much as I'd hoped. There's a lot that needs to be done. In the town, I've been in the town since '72. I've been on the Housing Authority, the Housing Partnership Committee, the Fair Housing Committee, and the Conservation Commission, among others. And one of the most constructive things was the Housing Partnership Committee, because we drafted the first inclusionary zoning bylaw, which worked for Canterbury Estates and then was revised at the initiative of the Housing Authority, of the Planning Board. And so it's in a slightly different form now. And we got drafted by a consultant, the bylaws for the Housing Trust, which helped to launch that. And we came up with a CPA-supported housing loan program, which was appropriated $175,000, but we couldn't find anybody to run it. And we didn't have the staff for that. So the money finally went to the trust. Presently, we have 78 elderly units at Thaxter Park, and 6 congregate units there, and 8 family townhouses towards the back, and 50 Section 8 certificates, which people can use any place, along with 6 units used at the Veterans Housing. So that it sounds like a lot, but we have a waiting list of over 500 people, and it's been a 5 to 8 years wait for a lot of people. And so the needs are still there, and the recent projections show the aging of the boomers, which some of us are, or might have, and that the profile of the need is going to be more older households. This is partly because young and middle-aged households aren't moving in, given the housing prices. So there's a need for lower-class housing for the elderly, and there's a need for more diverse housing for general population. Stop. If I hadn't stopped, I would have asked you to vote for me to continue, because we have a couple interesting projects coming along, joint projects for elderly and special needs and workforce. But I can't talk about that now.
Thank you, Megan and Jim. So just to clarify, Megan is running, Megan has an opponent for the seat she is running for. Jim does not have an opponent, so you'll see another name on the ballot, Mary Pizzelli, who can't be here tonight. So are there any questions from the audience for the Housing Authority?
We know you want to ask. It's
Go ahead.
okay.
Judy has a question. Go ahead, Judy. Thank you.
Can you bring us up to date on what is happening with the Housing Authority property on Beale Street and, go with it? Do you think it's a good thing? What would you like to see there? Or I don't even know enough to ask you a good question about it. I'm sorry.
It's complicated. Part of it is up to council and up to the judiciary process, unfortunately. But there's two things. That we have land on Beale Street where the 100 Beale Street house is the school for disturbed kids. And we have land behind that, which we, the authority, own without question. And we've been working on a 55-plus development there. Personally, I'd rather have a wider age range, but that still is more diverse than straight elderly. CPA gave us money to have a housing needs study done by Lynn Sweet of LDS Consulting.
I'm just going to move this closer to you.
Yeah, thank you.
In the back.
Yeah, much better. And then we got a second grant from Sevi Strekalowski to do a preliminary design, which has worked out very well. But this past year, we sought a third CPA application, and were told that we couldn't seek more money for that site because of some conflict with selectmen's goals, which I don't claim to understand. But since then, we've been having some preliminary discussions with several agencies about a you might say a joint development, multi-purpose, with some housing for special needs kids, former kids, some housing for general older population, and some workforce housing. Time to stop.
Time to stop. Megan, do you have a comment
I mean,
on
I'm
that?
still waiting through it. I have 2 binders at home that are about this thick that the Housing Authority gave me so that I can do my research and figure it out. I've made it through one of the binders, and I'm working through the other one. So, I'm trying to learn as much as I can.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the audience? I have a question. Can you explain the relationship between the Hingham Housing Authority and the Hingham Affordable Housing Trust? And I'll start with Megan this time.
Oh, excuse me.
Only vaguely. I mean, the Hingham House, please tell me if I'm wrong, because this is my understanding. As I said, I'm still researching. As I said, the Hingham Housing Authority is mandated by the state. It has a paid employee who's employed by the state, and then she has some assistants who work in her office over on Thaxter Street. It is in charge, and we're running basically for the board to sort of help advise her and help her in her work. It's mandated. As I said, it's a matter of sort of good public policy statewide to have affordable housing in a community for basically the 3 reasons that I listed in my little intro speech. And the Hingham Affordable Housing Trust, it doesn't have the state mandate, but it has sort of the town mandate, and it's kind of more of a moral authority in town to help people who need to stay in town. Is any of that right?
That's all right.
Thank you, Megan. Jim, what can you
The
add?
difference is the housing authority is created. Every town has to have one. Every town has one, and we're a state entity with a local name, with 4 members elected locally and 1 appointed by the state. And the trust is a local invention created by statute, because we and the Housing Partnership helped get the bylaws to develop for it. It's very entrepreneurial. It can do lots of things, and it has a large sum of money to do things when the opportunities come up. And they came up with the project for the selectmen's parcel and the land next to it 15 years ago. A firm called Affirmative Investments had a very good design and couldn't get financing. So that whole swath of land is still waiting things, and the trust is coming up with various ideas about how to use it. They're very good. They're a very good group.
Excellent. Thank you. Are there any other questions for the Housing Authority? I'd like to ask you to join me in thanking Megan and Jim for joining us tonight. Thank you. And right out of her office, Eileen McCracken, who is our candidate for town clerk, has arrived, and we really appreciate that she zipped over here tonight and made time for us. So Eileen candidate for town clerk. And if you'd like to come right to the lectern and make an opening statement, that'd be great. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I want to thank the town, sorry, let me start over again. The Republican Town Committee for having the forum, and also people who have voted for me in the past. With great pride, I've been the town clerk for 21 years. The position has helped me to learn a lot about the town of Hingham, the people that live here, and also about myself. I'm dedicated to the town and happily continue to perform the duties of the office. During the next term, my term, we'll have midterm primary, general election, the 2020 census, and then we will again be doing another presidential election. Along the way, I'm sure there'll be changes in election procedures. I'm sorry, I'm out of breath. At this election, we're going to be using our new machines, and they'll be fairly similar to the machines that we've used with some updates. And I'll hope that everybody will come out to try them on April 28th, and the polls will be open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. I also hope that everybody will come out and vote for me. Your vote will permit the town clerk's office to continue with its dedication to the citizens of the town of Hingham and all who enter. Phew. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Eileen. Are there any questions for Eileen? I have one. Have we been hacked?
Just say Eileen McCracken.
Do you feel confident in our voter security system?
I do. And the reason is that we're not electronic. We do have paper backup, even though it seems very old and crazy, but we'll always have that to fall back on and be able to count a vote if we have to count them by hand.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Oh, I have another then. Obviously, I think about this a lot as leading up to it. Can you tell people about early voting and all that? Is going to be any of that before the town elections?
There is no early voting before town elections, municipal elections. There may be before the primary. They're still talking about that. We'll know soon. If we do have it, it'll only be a week, not the 2 weeks like we had for the general election, for the presidential election, but we will have it in the fall for the November election. And there is absentee, and we actually have the absentee ballots available now.
And do they go into the town hall and request them? Or phone?
They can go into the town hall. You can do it by mail. You can get the form offline and send it in.
Excellent. Any other questions for Eileen? She came all the way over.
It's all right.
That's great. Well, thank you. Oh, Kristen has a question.
Hi, Kristen.
Hi, Eileen. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm curious to get your opinion on same-day voter registration.
I'm not too pleased about it. I don't think that it would be a good thing for us. You know, it maybe if they made the period of time shorter, like tonight was my last day to register to vote. It's usually 20 days prior to the election. But when we had early voting, we did it 5 days before the early voting started. So we were able to do it in that period of time. But same-day voting to me seems as though it could be tragic. Somebody could go in one town, this is my thought anyway, I don't know whether other people feel that way, they could go to one town, vote, and then come to Hingham and register to vote there and maybe vote there too. I don't think that it's a good system.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, if there are no more questions, then I would like to thank all the candidates who came tonight to participate. Are there any candidates out there that I forgot or missed? No, excellent. Thank you all for coming. Thanks to Eileen for joining us. I'd like to extend my particular thanks to the members of the Hingham Republican Town Committee who organized this, Missy Smith, Lorraine Finneran, Nathan Rasmussen, and Jillian, who is here for backup, Edna English. And I'd like to thank the library for hosting us, and to HCAM for filming this. This will be played on their camera in the weeks leading up to the election. And town elections will be held on Saturday, April 28th. Please don't forget to vote. And that concludes our program for tonight. So thank you, everybody, for joining us.